Hello to everyone, this is Gunther Steiner, this is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Hey, Chris Medland, my friend, haven't seen you in a while. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks, mate. How are you?
I am great, and the good news is we get to hang out for a few minutes and talk some Formula One. The bad news is neither one of us are in Florida. What's up with that?
Yeah, no, it sucks. I was meant to be at Daytona, but some guy called Kevin Magnussen decided to have surgery on a hand, didn't he? So, yeah, the fact that he wasn't there meant kind of a moot point for me to be there. But I still get my US fix next week, heading over for the Red Bull event in New York. So that'll be fun.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I have a much smaller excuse because Florida's only about a 2-hour flight for me, but I just could not make it work. So I'm going to be watching it, though. So it'll be fun to watch the Rolex.
Oh, it's an epic race. I guess by the time people are hearing this, it's probably all wrapped up. But hopefully it was as good as we're giving it billing. Exactly.
Hopefully it will be. But let's talk some Formula One, Chris, because I buzzed you because this craziness between FIA, Mohammed bin Sulayem, and Formula One, and the war of words that have been fired across, actually pretty formally now with a letter from the Formula One to the FIA. This has gotten really interesting. What's your take on all of this?
Yeah, it started off, I think, a bit petty. All a bit kind of back and forth was on matters that weren't all that important, or it's not such a big deal when the FIA leak the calendar for 2023 a bit early, or release it early. I guess it's not a leak, is it? But they were doing things that were maybe annoying Formula One, but not a huge issue. And vice versa. I don't think everything Formula One did was to keep the FIA happy. But then for Ben Sulayem to wade in with his view of what F1 could be worth, and whether he thought that a $20 billion valuation from a report in Bloomberg was overinflated or not, and to say he thought it was massively overinflated and any potential buyer should be careful around that. I mean, that could influence the share price. So that's obviously going to really annoy Formula One. It also could cross a lot of lines in terms of legislation and regulatory kind of law, because if he's deemed to have inside knowledge of that company, which you could expect he might well have as the president of the FIA, knowledge of Formula One and the way it works, then that could break a lot of those laws. So it was a proper warning that, hang on, like, you can give your opinion on lots of things. We might not be happy about a lot of the stuff you say or do, but some of it we've just got to kind of suck up. This crosses a line. So yeah, to get an actual legal letter, I think it was the first time that Formula One went from he's being difficult or annoying on certain topics to, well, this could be damaging for us, which kind of changes the whole dynamic around the relationship between the two.
Yeah, you talk about affecting the stock price, and that's when you're going to get everybody's attention. And so, yeah, I mean, I totally understand F1's viewpoint on this, and I like the phrase that they apparently used, and I guess Sky Sports was the one that really started breaking all this, but they said the F1 has the exclusive rights to exploit the commercial rights in the FIA Formula One World Championship, and that's under a 100-year deal. So it's almost like you don't really have any say in this, and here you are, expressing your opinion on the value and potentially affecting the stock price. I mean, I totally get F1's viewpoint here.
Yeah, I mean, there's also kind of legal aspects that the FIA have to adhere to based on EU legislation, which is what basically created the situation where the FIA had to give the commercial rights to Formula One, or as in split them, because they were saying you can't be the regulator and the commercial rights holder. There's kind of a conflict of interest there. So that means that they have to abide by certain rules. And as much as technically the FIA owns Formula One and has leased the commercial rights to Liberty Media and Formula One itself, it doesn't have the power, or certainly doesn't appear to have the power. There was some interesting wording in some of the documentation when Liberty Media purchased F1 about needing the FIA's approval or waiting on it, or certain topics it needed or wanted to run past the FIA and have rubber stamped. And then in this legal letter, it suggests that there's none of that. So where the truth lies there, I'm not completely certain. And there's a chance that maybe Formula One was being very firm with its letter to the FIA, but in a sense, actually, it couldn't do a huge amount about it. But it just shows how upset and annoyed they were, because the letter itself as well was undersigned by both Formula One's head of legal, but also Liberty Media's. So it was a two-pronged kind of response to say, look, you've crossed the line here.
Yeah, and I did read the same thing. So it's a little murky there, isn't it, on exactly what role everybody has, considering the sale or the exchange of the rights there. So, and the first thing that comes when I first started hearing this, of course, I started thinking about Live Golf and all that, because that fund. I mean, those guys. I was joking around with somebody. I said they're playing with play money, because they just they have so much money. If they were to overpay, if it really were only worth 15 billion, they're going to pay 20. It wouldn't matter to them, so they can just throw money around like that. But it also goes back to, if you think about Liberty Media, John Malone is an investor. He's a buyer and seller of assets, right? So if he paid 4.4 billion back in 2017, or maybe late 16, depending on when that actually took place, if somebody offers him multiples of what he paid, as an investor, you go, he might just sell it, and that's kind of scary to me.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, because so if we haven't made it clear, it was the Saudi Arabia's public investment fund that was linked with a potential bid for all of Formula One's commercial rights, and according to the Bloomberg article, valued it at $20 billion, or that's kind of where they were looking at. I think it actually said in excess of 20 billion. But as I understand it from Formula One's point of view, that was never on the table, that there was discussions about potential investment into the company, and maybe a partnership or sponsorship deals, but there wasn't, takeover or purchase never really went anywhere or was seriously entertained. Liberty were like, we're not open for selling. So I think that was also another reason why it was strange that Ben Sulayem came out 3 days after this report came out. He had the whole weekend to kind of think about it, to make a comment. But you are right that Liberty will be wondering at which point is the right time to sell, if they're going to sell, because you want to obviously sell at the point that you're going to get the most return. But Formula One has been growing and continues to grow, and is not long out of the pandemic where revenues took a hit. But you're right. I saw some calculations that essentially revenues have pretty much, or the value of the assets have pretty much trebled since Liberty took over. So whether that's accurate or not, that does start to move towards those ballpark figures that you were talking about, $15 to $20 billion of a takeover. And you're also, if you're Liberty, you're going to entertain people talking about it, because then it means anyone who does want to buy it in future knows kind of the figures that are out there. You're pushing the price up in that sense. So I'm not convinced that it wasn't a story that wasn't denied, if that makes sense, from Bloomberg. Mm-hmm. So that figure was circulated, because that doesn't hurt Liberty, but what Ben Sulayem said could, and that's why there was the frustration at that. But for anyone kind of thinking, oh, is F1 about to be sold, I don't get that impression at all. I don't think the response from Liberty was, we're not interested in selling. I think they could continue to grow it a lot more. They're invested in things like Vegas. There's a lot of positive momentum around F1 at the moment. It's when that momentum slows that I think they'll start to wonder if it's the right time to cash in. Yeah,
to me, there's at least a little bit of reason for concern to sell, because anytime you've got an asset that's on the way up, they always say you want to sell when business is good, instead of, in a fire sale. So I'm not even insinuating, I know nothing. I'm just saying that it just, it wouldn't be an absurd thing for them to take an investment if they could get 4 or 5 times a multiple to sell it. Right.
You're also at that point, you're thinking you're selling on a projection. If you're saying, Formula One is growing and going in a good direction, then you can say to a potential buyer, well, look how big it could become. That's why we're going to charge you this for it, or want to sell it at this price. But there's no guarantee it actually gets there. And that would be, that is smart business. But no, I just don't get the impression that that's where they're at right now.
One thing that came to my mind also is when Liberty bought the series, how much angst there was from the folks in the UK that this sport was going to get Americanized. and now I'm sitting here having those exact same feelings about what could happen. So yeah, now I know what you guys were talking about.
Well, to be fair, on my point of view, I was really excited about it. Does help writing for racer. So if you're talking for American outlets, it was kind of cool to see. But also, F1 was just in desperate need of this kind of overhaul in terms of a media mind on it, and how could it reach more people, because it's such an incredible sport, but not enough people were getting into it. And they've done a really good job on that front so far. So I think Liberty probably have taken some confidence as well from the way things have gone, certainly since the pandemic, using that and actually kind of springboarding forward with a very lucrative sport that they now own. I think that's been very impressive, but will give them the confidence that they can continue to do it, which is, again, I think another reason why maybe they're not quite at the point of wanting to sell. But I'm sure there is plenty of interest. I'm sure there's other companies and investment funds that are going, if it was available, we'd want to talk about that.
Yeah. It's funny. I think back in previous shows, I said, this Netflix deal has been worth billions. And clearly that was an obvious statement, but now it's there's a little bit of not proof, but a little bit of evidence that it truly was worth billions, because you can put most of this value increase on that Netflix series of Drive to Survive. So yeah, that was a phenomenal thing, and we all know that. But here's some black and white. But hey, speaking of that, the Netflix series is coming up soon. Chris, do you think you're gonna make the cut, buddy?
I know that we make the cut. I found out the other day, actually. I was having a chat with Haas, and apparently one of the early episodes is the Saudi Arabia, speaking of, or incident with Gunter, when I misheard what he said he would do to the paddock while we were live on air post-race. So Netflix were there to capture that, and apparently that's in the show. So I haven't seen it myself yet. I'll only see it when it comes out, but it'll be cool to see.
I assumed you would have let me know, buddy, over a text if you'd heard about that. That's really cool, man.
It was about 2 or 3 days ago I found out. So I was like, until I see it for myself as well, I always kind of, you wonder that, because they haven't finally signed off. I was talking to someone from Formula One the other day, and the final episodes are still getting signed off now. They get final approval very close to the point that it gets released. So I think we're talking, 4 weeks until the release date. So as far as I'm aware, it was approved in that episode. So that'll be funny to watch, because I think you'll just see some good facial expressions that explain why I had to go back to Gunter to ask what was actually said, but B, then maybe backs up his feeling that he clearly hadn't said it. That's gonna be a fun watch. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to my son last night, and I said, I bet we don't make it. And he goes, "Are you kidding? That's a huge, hilarious thing. It'll make it." I said, okay, well, we'll see. But,
I mean, it's a bit of luck of the draw, because we had some great stuff actually on the live shows, didn't we, during the whole season? But if the cameras aren't around, then it's not going to be on there. Whereas if it had been, on a TV broadcast, so they can actually take that footage if they really wanted. So we were a bit fortunate, I guess, that Netflix were around at that point when we did that interview, and they got it. So that'll be cool to watch back.
Well, I know I said just going to have you for a few minutes, but before we go, real quick, Mohammed bin Sulayem was also tweeting about Andretti and all of that, and it's been a little bit quiet on the Andretti front lately, which I expect that to be right now. Have you heard anything?
No, nothing further on that. I did run, just to do a self plug, an interview feature with Christian Horner a few days ago. It's on racer.com, where I did ask him about Andretti and kind of got the proper team's perspective on it. It was good. It was very honest. And when Michael says it's all about money, he's completely right. And Christian says the same thing. But he also makes it very clear. It's like, it's not about Andretti. He's like, Andretti and GM and Cadillac are huge brands that absolutely would be welcome in F1 and should be in F1. It's just about the way we go about doing that. So it's kind of saying that if you've got these brands trying to come in as a new team, that could dilute a fund. We're not so happy. If we can get those brands to come in by taking over another team, perfect. But if they're not going to be able to take over another team and they want an entry, then essentially the tipping point isn't where the Concord Agreement currently says. That's why teams aren't happy. It was a good explanation of why teams are pushing back on a new team coming in, why right now they're not happy at the terms from a new team perspective, but that it has nothing to do with it being Andretti, GM, Cadillac. That those are brands that they do want to see and think could well happen. So it was. What I liked is that Christian was pretty honest with it. If anyone who thinks it's about money, like absolutely is, yes, but he's like, it's not a personal thing or anything. The rhetoric that Andretti isn't wanted and that people don't want this American team, he says that's completely false. It'd be great to have. So it'll be interesting to see, because I think it's fair. I saw a reply on Twitter to when I put the story up where someone said, yeah, it's that's a good explanation and fair points from his side, but saying that they need to pay more than the $200 million anti-dilution fee that's currently in the Concord agreement surely is moving the goalposts, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah, that's true. You can accuse them of that, but with the quotes that are there and the points that Horner makes, you can also understand why they're in that position. And I think if Andretti was an existing team on the grid, in the same way that when Haas came in, they had to get approvals, and now they're there. When you look at what it could do in terms of potentially costing you a bit of money to let another team come in and compete against you and potentially take even more money from you if they beat you, just as a business decision, you can see why they're wary and they're going to push to make sure that they're protected if they do allow it to happen.
Yeah, I completely get it. They're not, since they can't change that 200 million, they need to be completely selective on who they're going to let in, and I don't blame them. And I've also seen some apologetic comments from Michael Andretti himself saying maybe we did, I can't remember, I just saw them yesterday, just basically saying maybe we were pushing a little too hard. And you have to understand, it's exactly what we're saying about the value of the sport. It's skyrocketed. We all know that $200 million is way undervalued now, that the anti-dilution fee. So I don't blame anybody in Formula One for being selective, and let's get it right. It's pretty compelling with Andretti, GM, Cadillac. So if they for some reason somebody else beats them to it, I think we're going to be pretty excited about whoever that is too. But my guess is it might be both. If there's somebody better, then you might get both, because what they say, we can have up to 13 teams. So
I think it's 12 at the moment is what's written.
12 currently?
I think so. Or for 2 extra at this point, from what teams have been saying. But also there's the main argument is they're saying there's a new Concord agreement needs agreeing in 2025 or by the end of 2025, which means they're probably going to start those talks in 2024. Which means that's next year. So they could pull that forward a bit. And I think that's what the teams in F1 want to do as well, is kind of go, okay, what are we not happy about? I don't know if you were picking that up, but the dog was chewing on a toy and it's squeaking.
No, I didn't hear the dog. I did tell Jess it was really rude to walk through the show and not even say hi. But I didn't hear the dog.
Well, because I've got headphones on, so she couldn't hear anything. She bring me my lunch. It was great. So apologies for the carnage that's happening over here on this side of the pond. But the teams in F1 are kind of going, okay, then maybe we find out what's the figure that we think is right for a franchise in a healthy Formula One, or do we remove a figure altogether and say we will discuss the terms with any new team and don't put it in writing because circumstances can change. For example, say they make it 600 million now. If they say that's what it's now worth, well, it was worth 200 million at the time they put it in last time. It could be worth $1 billion by the time a new team wants to come in, or it could go the other way. And, Formula One could start to decline and suddenly you can't expect someone to pay 600 million. All of that, I think it's actually silly to have that firm fee in there and give everyone that target, but at the same time, it boosted the value of every team that exists. So it's a complex situation. I do understand that, and that Andretti won in because the sport is going places, it's growing. There's value in it for them if they can get in, and they can add value to the sport too. So everybody wants something, and it's trying to find if there's a way of just balancing it all together, and that's tricky to do. But I'm hopeful that this will continue to allow brands to come into the sport. I feel like there's probably a team or two that still could take additional investment or potentially be taken over. Williams is the one that springs to mind. If you think of Dalton and what they paid and what they could make now, that's one. But I feel like there's maybe a couple that could still be open to those sorts of talks. Beyond that, I think if someone did take them over and big brands had come in, anyone else would essentially need to be a new team. So F1 needs to think long and hard about how it wants to make that process work. And maybe they've been caught out now that Andretti have put together something so good, so compelling that they're kind of like, oh crikey, yeah, okay, what's the number? And we say yes to it. And we may still get there. I'm not thinking the door's fully closed.
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong. My having Andretti Cadillac would be an absolute dream for me. I think that I could not be more excited about any combination there. So, well, Chris, hey, what are we, 5 weeks from the Formula One season where we can get started and do it all again, man? I'm fired up about it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. It's going to come around quick, actually. I'm sat here and it's like late January and still trying to sort things and plan logistics. And then you realize that, yeah, this time, as I speak to you, this time next week, we'll have had the Red Bull launch, which will be exciting. And then that will, kick off launch season. Haas unveiling in probably about 48 hours time from this going out. So, everything's going to start rolling pretty quickly. And from then, it's just from one thing to another. It's car launch after event, testing, first race. So I'm quite excited about the way they've done that. To have testing just a week before the first race again and keep it sort of tight means there's going to be a lot of interest, but that interest will still be peaked when we have lights out in Bahrain. So looking forward to it. Yeah,
one of those changes that came from the pandemic. Yeah. Chris Medland, thanks, buddy. And we will be talking to you soon. Good to see your face.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on the show. And good to speak to everyone.
See ya.
Thank you.